If you are interested in acquiring any of my Overkill's tutorial guides from Microsoft Flight Simulator, or simply interested in supporting the channel, please consider joining us on Patreon. Patreon subscribers level tier 2 and above have access to all of my guides, as well as any future releases that come down the road. Patreon link can be found in the description below. Hello you guys and welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to be talking about motion simulation. I got an email the other day from one of my viewers asking if I felt that motion simulation was worth the cost. Knowing how I feel about spending money, knowing what my background is, that I don't come from a lot of money, that I had to fight my way up, and I remember the days of every single dollar counting, and especially when it came to flight sim equipment. The struggles I went through trying to find high quality when I was on a really tight budget and things like that. And so the question was, given that history, how I felt about motion simulation, the cost of motion simulation, and if it is worth it. And so today we're going to be talking about quite a few things. Now we're going to be using, obviously, this as our reference. This is the DOF Reality H3 motion simulation platform. This is a 3 degrees of freedom platform, so it has pitch, roll, and yaw. I'm going to give you guys all of my thoughts on it. It's been right around 6 months since I acquired this lovely piece of device, and I've got both my pros and my cons I'm going to be talking to you guys through with this specific piece of equipment. And then I'm going to be talking about how I feel about motion simulation in general and who I feel it is for. Now, obviously, all the opinions and thoughts you guys are about to hear are mine and my own. It's really still always going to come down to what is important to you. What do you find valuable in simulation, whether it be all the buttons and switches like the cockpit that you guys have seen before that I have behind me with all the panels, or is it just the physical immersion that you're looking for? And that's where a lot of this starts to differ. So first, let's talk about what the benefits I feel from motion simulation are. And again, using only this one as my reference point. Okay, now the first thing of motion simulation that I feel is critical. I know you have the ability to use 2D. So if you are a monitor user, right? I have temporarily one time for about 3 days, I mounted a monitor onto the top platform up here where the Pimax crystal's sitting and the Gear Falcon Cessna control is. And I did not like it. I did not like it at all. There was absolutely no part of it that I enjoyed. I felt that the motion simulation experience was truly hindered by the 2D experience, because I could still see the room, I could see the walls, I could see my environment. And so, yes, it was neat that the chair moved when I moved the stick, but it wasn't immersive. It was just sort of like being in one of those, motion arcade rides, where you have for example, the old motorcycle rides, right? Where you'd get on the motorcycle and you'd have to lean it, but you're playing on an arcade. It was a very crippling experience for what the system offers. So in my personal opinion, the very first thing that you have to look into when you think about going to motion simulation is, again, in my opinion, I'm going to stress that, virtual reality. Virtual reality gives you first the visual isolation, right? That I was just talking about. You don't see the walls. You don't see any of your personal environment, right? All you see is the simulation. And this doesn't even have to be with a, ridiculously powerful headset. This could go all the way back to the Rift S. The Rift S, you still get the black, peripheral vision, right? You can see that the screen's up here, right? But, you still get that black distance there, right? But the nice thing about virtual reality is it takes you out of your room, out of your office, whatever it may be. That's step one to me. You have to be in a position, to me, to get the most out of the incredible cost of any motion simulation platform. And this is still one of the cheaper ones. You start going into some of the other brands and other developers, guys, and where this thing is, I think right now, right around $2,200 to $2,500, depending on sales and things like that. I've seen them go all the way to $5,000, $6,000, okay, and higher, and they go higher than that, right? So they can get pretty crazy. So that's a step one. I think virtual reality is an absolute must in order to get the most benefit from it. Not necessarily the only benefit, but I think to get the most immersion out of it. Then you have other expenses such as the Sim Pro app, I think is what it's called. I can't remember now, Sim App Pro or something like that. And that's what actually takes the telemetry from whatever simulator you're running and putting it into the pit. And there are pro versions, which is a subscription base. I think it's a yearly subscription is what I'm doing. And so you have the cost there. And then you have to start looking at peripherals. The thing about any of these motion simulation platforms is they have a weight limit. I'm a big boy, right? I am sitting right around 279, 280 pounds at 6'1". Okay. This thing I think's max weight supported, right? So listed weight max capability is like 330 pounds, somewhere around there. After you put in your flight stick, your throttle, your rudder pedals, right, starts to add up. And then you put my big butt on there, and yeah, we're probably pretty close. Now, I haven't had any problems. I've heard some noises occasionally that I'm not too fond of in the past, but they always end up going away. So I push that off to something else and hoping it's something different, right? But I digress there. So then you have to look, but what I'm getting at there is how much equipment do you want on it? You know, now if you're not someone who's my size, the door is wide open for you, right? You can have all your buttons and boxes and switches and things like that. But again, being in virtual reality, that's when you have to start doing your weights and balances of, is it worth it? Because you're going to be doing this, right? In VR, you gotta feel it. So you have to develop that muscle memory. Okay. And that's something that, you know, when I fly over here in the pit, you know, I'll still use the Pimax, whether it be the Crystal or the 8KX that I've got up here, which we're going to be doing a comparison video on those pretty soon here. And just, you know, as far as whether or not it's worth it to upgrade. I have some interesting thoughts on that I want to share with you guys. But when it comes to the switch panels, things like that, you have to ask yourself, are you willing to sacrifice, right? Are you willing to deal with that, trying to develop your motion, your muscle memory, you know, and have the VR and the motion pit, or are you willing to sacrifice the virtual reality, the immersion of being in that secluded environment that we were talking about earlier visually, for the 2D and having all of your button boxes and switches and things, right? There's a lot of things to consider. The other thing is space. Now, this actually doesn't take up much space, guys. This is probably my tower is right here. Okay, that's the end of my computer tower. To the wall is only right around, I would say, maybe 4.5 feet. It's really not as bad as you think. And I thought that it would be significantly more than that. I thought I would need a lot more space to truly be able to use this comfortably. I mean, I've got the other pit right behind it. This is the arm to the monitor stand that you guys have seen in other videos. So, I mean, it's right behind it and they don't hit. I can still get in and out of it, all that good jazz. So when it comes down to, is it worth it? This is the next step, I would say, is how much functionality do you want? This is a 3 degrees of freedom sim pit, right? So again, pitch, roll, and yaw. It goes further than that. They go up to 6 degrees of freedom, where you have the lift. I can't remember what the word is right now. You guys have to forgive me. I'm pretty tired. It's late at night here. But where you have the lift and you have the sway, right? And those are going to change things too, right? But obviously that jacks the cost up, right? I mean, I think there are 6 degrees of freedom from DOF reality, if I remember last time I looked, was again approaching that $4,000-$5,000 mark, if not higher. You know, it's been a minute since I've looked. So then you have to ask yourself what level. Like, for example, the VR sim pilot guys, VR flight sim guy, if you guys check out his channel, he's got the DOF reality, but his is the 2 degrees of freedom. So he's just got pitch and roll, and he loves it. Absolutely loves it. And I have disabled the yaw on this before, and I've done a previous video talking about that, where when I disable the yaw, I can tell in certain times that the yaw is disabled, but for the most part, for flight simulation for me, it was still a night and day difference between sitting in the old chair or sitting in the cockpit to sitting in a motion pit with 2 degrees of freedom. It definitely is a wild ride, and the next step is taking the time into tweaking it. So you can take just 2 degrees of freedom or 3 degrees of freedom, and then you have to sit there and tweak the settings, mess with the settings, get it to where you want, to where it surges where you want, where it pulses where you want, where it smooths where you want, right? There's a lot of different settings, things like that you have to work with when it comes down to doing this. So there's still some time invested in getting it right. Very rarely are you going to, from my experience and my research and the things that I've done and the number of times that I've wiped my profile and started again with this, it's very much so not plug and play. I would not ever call these things plug and play. You can get the basic functionality pretty quick out of the box, but to get it to where it feels right to you to where you are in a constant state of feeling the motion of the aircraft within the limitations of the movement, right? Obviously, the aircraft can bank, do 360-degree rolls. This can't do 360-degree rolls, right? So getting the maneuvering of the pit to feel right and feel good in the maneuvering of the aircraft in your sim, that's a tricky part, and that requires more effort there too. With DOF Reality, one of their downfalls that I've mentioned before, now they are getting better at this. They're working on new videos. They're working on new documentation. Things have definitely changed in the last almost 6 months since I've had this. But I would say the assembly process for my DOF Reality H3 here was an almost 5-night project. It took about a week. All right. Now, obviously, that takes into consideration I have 3 kids. We have the old day job. I have YouTube videos, right, and things like that to do. So it wasn't like 24 hours times 5, right? But it was a long time, and it was multiple videos in order to find all the right setups that matched what I have here in order to get up and running. And even then, I ended up having to swap some things around after I got it working. Now, I will say that I personally have had a great experience with their support team. I was able to reach them on Discord. They were able to help me out with a couple troubleshooting issues with their software in the past. So, there's pros and cons to everything, right? So the final question of, is it worth it? I can't really answer it. What I can do is give you guys a couple of questions to ask yourself to help you make that final decision, hopefully. And one would be, what are you looking for in simulation? Are you looking for the combat switches and everything like we were talking about earlier? Are you looking for the big triple screens, the 360-degree field of view around you? Are you looking for the motion? Is it just the motion that you care about? Like you just want to be able to feel the aircraft, right? Or are you looking for an all-around immersive experience? And the reason why I say the all-around immersive experience is because if you're looking for a balance, in my personal opinion, for a reasonable cost, that's hard to achieve. Because in order to get a rig that is powerful enough to move all of the gear, and guys like me, if you're my size, and have the good VR with the wide field of view, I will say, in my personal opinion, when it comes to the motion simulation, specifically speaking to the motion simulation, I prefer my 8KX over the Crystal, and the reason is strictly field of view. Field of view on the 8KX is significantly larger in my opinion. I know that according to the website, it says that they're pretty close. There's a major difference in peripheral vision. That will be one of the things that we compare it to when we do our comparison video of the Crystal and the Pimax 8KX. But the 8KX's peripheral vision adds a ton. You get that sense of speed. So you take that sense of speed with that wide field of view, add the motion to it, and it's an incredible ride. Incredible ride. However, if you're more looking to the buttons and switches and you're more just all about interaction, then maybe this could be overkill, right? And that's something to think about as well. For me and what I'm looking for in simulation when it's just me flying, I don't use this very much in the videos anymore because it makes it hard to record. There's a lot of bouncing and jolting and things like that, and you guys unfortunately see that in the cameras. I haven't figured out how to compensate for that with OBS, which is why I've sort of steered away from recording in this lately. And that's just because I know that you guys, there was quite a few complaints on multiple videos where the camera was sort of doing this, and it's because my head's moving. The pit's moving, the pit's bouncing, jolting, and so it's making me move. But when I'm flying by myself, when it's just me and I'm flying for me, very rarely am I in the pit. I'm usually in this. I still use the crap out of this. I'm still in this a couple times a week when I just need to step away and relax and just kind of do my own thing. It doesn't happen as often as I'd like anymore. But it definitely is something that I cherish. I'm very grateful to have it. It's absolutely a phenomenal experience in VR. One of the other things that I'll tell you guys if you're interested in DOF Reality is they've listened to a few of us who have talked about the fact that there's no motor guard. There's nothing guarding all the motors and everything underneath it. Keep little kid hands, your own hands, cats, dogs, etc., out from getting under it. They fixed that. I'm actually waiting on my cover to come. There's a cover now that comes with it. That you can get that will hide all of the units and protect it. So that bumped them up a couple of notches for me, because for me, honestly, that was a big deal. Anytime my kids are in here, if they come near it right now, even with it shut off, I tell them to get the crap away from it because it will still move. I'm not going to do it right now because the Pimax is sitting right there. That'd be a bad thing to hit the floor, but it will move even with the motors turned off. It'll move freely. And when it starts getting into rotation, it will come down and pinch somebody. So my personal opinion for me, if I were to do it all over again, knowing what I know now, if I had to purchase this, my answer would be yes. It would be worth it to me. Because I am looking for the immersion. I am looking for that escape from the four walls. So VR is already a huge thing for me. Anytime I'm flying for myself, anytime, doesn't matter. DCS World, Microsoft Flight Simulator, combat aircraft, general aviation, it does not matter. Anytime that I'm flying just for me, I'm in VR. So that's the first thing. And so if I'm in VR, might as well jump in the motion pit and enjoy the ride. And it's an incredible experience. Absolutely, I would go out and buy one, knowing what I know now. But again, you're going to have to ask yourself, is it worth it to you? Ask yourself about the investment. Think about the cost. Think about all the hardware that you have. And not even just a matter of being able to support the weight. Is there a way to mount it? The one thing that I will say about DOF Reality and their overall design here, at least with this particular build right here, the one that's sitting in this room, it's very limiting for mounting capability. I have found it to be very challenging to mount things the way I like. Now, part of that also comes down to balance. I believe this is the case with all motion simulators. You do have to balance them. You have to distribute your weight accordingly. And that's another thing that you want to think about, is weight distribution. You can't have 60 pounds or 50 pounds worth of gear on one side and 10 pounds on the other. That could absolutely affect your performance. Could obviously put more strain on one motor versus the other, even if you're doing a hydraulic system, right? I think there's hydraulic and there's electric. Okay, these are electric motors. Maybe they're all electric. I don't know. I thought there was hydraulic ones, but I could be mistaken. Anyway, you guys get what I'm getting at. And then there's some, like, for example, NextLevelRacing. I believe you have four legs, right? So there's two on each side, and the individual legs lift up versus like this one where it's got the motors that moves the seat, right? Well, actually, I mean, it moves the whole rail, but you guys get what I'm getting at. But with all of those things, you also, like I said, you have to think about weight distribution as well. So it's not just a matter of, nope, I'm going to find a way to mount all my stuff. You have to watch the weight, and you have to make sure that weight is relatively distributed. Well, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I mean, obviously, the more balanced, the better performance, the less strain on the motors on one side, and if you start exceeding that one side's limits, you could start seeing some degradation performance on one turn versus the other, or one left versus the other, right? So those are things that I want you guys to think about. I know that doesn't exactly answer for everybody whether or not motion simulation is worth it. I gave you guys my opinion. For me, again, knowing what I know now, I would absolutely do this again, and I would absolutely do it out of my own pocket. But again, when it comes to flying in VR, I'm more of a simpleton. I don't need near as many controls things, where if I'm flying in 2D, I want everything. I want my switches. I want my buttons. I want my touch screens. I want my G1000. I want my GNS 530s. I want my Cougar MFDs from Thrustmaster when I'm in combat, right? And I actually am going to be mounting Cougar MFDs on this, because that part I actually do miss. I miss being, and I got pretty good at doing the whole eye close and hitting the right MFD button, right? But those are all things you got to think about. You really have to break down, think about all the equipment that you already have, right? If you're someone who has a ton of equipment, the odds of you being able to put all of it onto a motion pit may not be as high as you think, may not be as great as you think. And then you have to think about what's your expansion. Are you wanting to expand later on, or is this something that once you get it, this is all you're going to need? Because it's a huge investment. Like I said, I mean, there's nothing cheap about this. This thing is still over $2,000, right? So, and then you figure the $2,000 for this, you figure your $500, $600, $800, maybe more for your flight controls. You're, anywhere from $400 up to $2,400 in VR headsets, right? So then you have to have a computer that can push it all. So it's a huge investment. It's a huge investment, definitely. I hope at the very least this video gave you guys something to think about. I hope it gave you maybe some ideas on how you could expand your flight sim experience. And that's the other thing I will say, one last touch on it, is it's not obviously just limited to flight simulation. Very briefly, for about 3 or 4 days again. I did have American Truck Simulator set up on this. I had my steering wheel, my shifter, and all that, and that was quite a ride too. It was pretty cool. Wasn't near as gratifying as flight simulation because the motion that you get in something like American Truck Simulator just isn't as great. Now, if you were doing something like iRacing or something along those lines where you're moving fast and there's a lot of drag and turning and leaning, you're probably going to get a better experience. I want to get into racing. Unfortunately, I don't have the time dedicated to learn it all over. But eventually we'll be bringing racing to the channel, but that's way down the road here. Anyway, guys, again, I hope you found this video useful. Hope it gave you something to think about. If you have any questions about the DOF Reality H3 and my experiences with it, feel free to leave comments down below in the video, or you guys can hit me up on the Discord. A link to my Discord is in every single one of my videos, so if you guys want to check that out. As always, stay safe and healthy. See you in the next one.